Bizarre Reality Media. The reality we live in can be a very strange place. Most of the time, fact being stranger than fiction. How will we ever start to understand this reality we live in unless we question everything? Join me and a guest as we unravel the mysteries of this reality, one topic at a time. This is Inquiries of Our Reality with Shayn Jones.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of deep, open-minded conversation. I'm the one they call Shane, or some may even refer to me as Shane Squatch. But today for you guys, I have the return of Ari Asulin. You may recognize that name from the Alternative History of the World series, part 1 through 4. But today, he's here to break down the concept of predictive programming and how it correlates to current events, which definitely tie in to suppressed history. But before we get into this one today, just a couple of quick news and updates. First and foremost, I announced it on the Bizarre Encounters, or recently on Bizarre Encounters, but I want to put together a big Halloween special where I have a bunch of you guys call in, and Orin and I end up discussing it on Bizarre Encounters / this show. I'm going to kind of use it as a toss-up between the two. But basically what I'm trying to ask here from you guys is to call in to the hotline and hopefully leave some of your guys' encounter / experience reports so that I can be able to put together that special. I might do some live call-ins the day of, not 100% sure, but I definitely would like to have a little bit of a backlog to see if we're going to be able to pull off this special. So if at least a handful of you guys, maybe 10, can at least call in, I can hopefully put this Halloween special together because I want to kind of connect it with you guys and kind of bring you guys into the fold. So if you guys don't mind doing that, you guys have an extra few minutes, don't forget to call in and leave your report / experience, and I will give you that number in a few minutes here. But something else I wanted to quickly address, I mentioned it on the last episode, but for anybody that's been complaining about the ads on the old episodes, I did figure out the root of that problem. When I initially switched over from Red Circle to Spreaker, which is the RSS host which pushes out my podcast, apparently the ads had been embedded into my episodes and were transferred over onto Spreaker. So what you guys are experiencing, unfortunately, is double ads. I'm going to have to try to find a way to remove those, and it seems like the only way I'm going to be able to do it is to by hand go in and replace every single one of my old episodes. So it's going to be like 300 plus 100 something on Bizarre Encounters. So it's going to be a bit of a project. So I do apologize for all of the ads on the old episodes. There's not supposed to be that many, but if you guys can bear with me, hopefully I can start slowly kind of flipping over this process and fixing some of those old episodes. But for the time being, hopefully you guys will bear with me. And again, I apologize for any inconvenience with those episodes. But if there is an old episode that you guys really want to listen to, you guys could always use the 7-day free trial on the Patreon and be able to listen to that episode ad-free. And, you know, if you enjoy what you got over there, maybe you guys can even stick around. But I just wanted to address that real quick. And speaking about doing stuff with you guys too, September 4th is going to be the next episode of Bizarre Inquiries Live. If anybody's interested in checking that out or submitting any questions, clips, or articles, make sure you guys get it to us before then. And as far as the episode on that day, of course, we will end up posting the live link and all that and give more information as we get a bit closer. And the last piece of news and updates, the t-shirt / survey giveaway, not the giving away a survey, but giving away t-shirts, of course. If you guys don't mind taking a few extra minutes to fill out an 8-question quick survey that's all your guys' thoughts and opinions on the show, then you guys will be entered into a drawing to win any t-shirt of your choice off of the Bizarre Reality merch store. I'm going to do that once that reaches 50, hit a random number generator, but all of your guys' thoughts and opinions go towards helping the show grow and improve. So if any of you guys don't mind taking the extra couple minutes to do it, I would greatly appreciate it. And again, not too bad, not too hard. It's all just your guys' thoughts and opinions and whatever you guys feel for the show. And moving on, if anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, sharing their experiences or encounters, or contacting me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofallrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or you guys can always call or text the Bizarre Reality hotline, as I mentioned above, and that number is 313 364-1551. And if you happen to miss that, it is available down in the show description. And if you guys might be interested in supporting the show and all the hard work I do over here, there are a handful of different ways that you guys can do so. First and foremost, you guys can go and follow the show on Instagram or Facebook. You guys can go and check out the Patreon with 2 tiers available, ad-free/early access and full access. Or you guys can always go and check out the Bizarre Reality merch store with t-shirts starting at just $15.68 plus shipping, which ranges out to about $20, so about average for, most t-shirts at most places. And 2 birds, 1 stone, you guys can hopefully support one of your favorite podcasts, support the little guys, and rock some awesome merch all in the same move, all in the same swift move. And the next thing you guys can do is leave a review or rating for the show on any podcatcher you happen to use. And of course, if you guys do that, I will read it on the show and give you guys a big shout out. It's been a hot minute since I've gotten one for the show, even though the shows remain pretty constant. So if one of you guys doesn't mind leaving a review, I would definitely appreciate it. And the next way you guys can support the show is by sharing the show with a friend or sharing an episode with a friend if you think they might enjoy a particular episode. The next way you guys can support the show is by catching live shows on the Bizarre Reality Media YouTube and Twitch channels. You guys can even donate to the show directly if you guys don't mind getting me an energy drink to be able to keep me up through the night to be able to edit these episodes for you guys. You guys can always go and check out the affiliate links, Sticker Mule and Dimension Devices, with some additional discounts and credits available for you guys down there. And the last way you guys can support the show is by also going and checking out my other show, Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin. A little bit different in the aspect that we deep dive into stuff. We make some jokes along the way. We have some fun over there. But at the end of the day, maybe it's an extra show to get you through your work week, and maybe even another show that you guys can get involved with, and send in those calls and make it so we can put that Halloween special together. But every single thing that I mention is all available in the link tree, which is available down in that show description. And with that, let's get into the show. Please welcome back to the show for now his 5th return, but actually not part of the Alternative History of the World series, which we ran up to part 4. Please welcome back to the show, Ari Asulin from Paradigm Threat. How's it going today, man?
Thank you. Glad to be here. It's been going excellent.
Say, absolute pleasure to have you back on again. We're kind of talking a little bit before we started, saying that we got kind of into the flow with every month and a half we're doing another episode, but unfortunately we kind of finished that series. But I know from recently talking to you, there's a lot of new things to dive into, so won't be part of that series, but hopefully we can start up something else new and get back to doing an episode every couple months.
Yeah, sure. It's been a lot of fun.
Say, it's always, like I've mentioned every other time, man, I like the way you do your research. I like how detailed you are with it. So you're one of those people that if you want to make a point, man, you gotta have Ari on to talk about it. But I guess for anybody that may not have listened to the last 4 episodes, because this is a totally different series, why don't you let them know a little bit about your website and a little bit about what you do before we get into today's topic?
Definitely. My name is Ari Asulin, and I run the website paradigmthreat.net. It is a conspiracy repository, although I think the word conspiracy is becoming passé, but that is what it was originally called.
False truths or hidden truths or something maybe now.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of things to call it now. Disclosure and all kinds of stuff. Better words out there. And as a repository, it just collects everything that I've been finding over last 15 years. The reason why I started is because the internet just seemed to get into this habit of deleting everything. Archives were missing, and the Wayback Machine doesn't seem to have everything anymore, especially photos and pictures.
I've noticed that doing a lot of research, even on my end, talking about cryptid stuff, it was Internet Archive, that whole thing was completely blocked up where you could find timestamps for multiple times a date. I've noticed now it's one timestamp for a month. I don't know if they started deleting records, because their servers are getting too full, air quotes, or, maybe they are really trying to delete information off there.
Mm-hmm. I think it's too bad that that's our only place that's real. I haven't found another site to match it. I know that there are archives out there, but not public ones. And it's kind of like Wikipedia. It's too bad that Wikipedia is our only one, because we kind of have to just trust a couple of guys to be, doing the right thing. But I started collecting images that I was starting to realize I couldn't find anymore. And sometimes if you just have an image or a meme or something, it just can be so convincing, worth 1,000 words and whatnot, that if you were to just keep it, you might actually change some minds. Or you might sort of remember for yourself that this is real. This is something that I found and understood what it meant. And everything since, articles that are coming out, just don't quite, nail it that one way. So That's sort of the replacement ideology the internet has taken, where nobody's holding on to old things at all, old wisdom, old quotes, whatnot. And
I mean, you even see that with music and media, just to kind of expand it now. I mean, you talk to a lot of these younger people that are like early 20s, and they're completely oblivious to a lot of media from like even the 90s. Like growing up, I'm sure you're kind of the same generation as me. Like you were semi-familiar with at least stuff that went back to 70s, 80s, early 90s stuff. But it seems like this generation, it's like a block off, or even like the stuff that was from when they were a kid is like almost too old for them. Like it's kind of a weird thing, and the only time that they come back around to something is if it becomes like catchy again, like it becomes like a thing. Like certain 90s bands have been coming back, certain 90s movies, but for the most part it's like history, even simply just media, like music, like they're oblivious to everything previous to like the 90s realistically.
Yeah, I agree. I think essentially they're sort of the industry, the music and the movie industry is well aware of this, what you just described, and they were aware of it before any of us were. And they had this choice a while back, or maybe it was always like this, to exploit that thing they know, or to stop, being what I'd call ethically dubious. Where, like, for example, when something comes out that is long overdue, like a live action film from a video game or something, and they do it in a way that literally splits the fan base between those old people and the new people that never played the old games and whatnot. I do believe they know what they're doing, that they're exploitive and doing it on purpose.
Look at Star Wars, prime example.
Yes, and Star Wars was such a purposefully deliberate sabotage project, that is to say Star Wars 7, 8, and 9 episodes, that Disney is like now actually trying to forget that ever existed. They're delisting it. We've never seen anything like this before. It's not really all that crazy. It's still going to be on airplanes and stuff. But I mean, I don't see it in all the collections anymore. I see episode 1 through 6. It's like they definitely wanted to ruin the franchise, but they went a little far. And now they have to like pretend like those 3 movies. I'm rambling anyway. So you get the idea. They've done it too often. Another example would be the Sonic movies. Anyone's fan of the games or the comics would know that they did not connect at all. And the things that I'm most interested in is predictive programming. That is where I can sense the agenda in a movie, not because I have some sixth sense, but because it's a repeating theme over and over and over, repeating theme. Like we've seen this in other movies, completely unrelated movies, the same concepts. And usually there are things that are obvious, like global warming.
Rationalizing for the bad guy, because most of the time there's not a hard villain in anything now. Now it's like they want you to feel sympathetic for the villain and understand the villain's perspective on why he became bad and that he's not really that bad.
That is a perfect way of putting it. And I'm just going to give the example of Mission Impossible. It just came out, The Final Reckoning. I was a little disappointed in it, but aside from the plot, it had that plot. It had there's a supercomputer out there that decided it's best for humanity to depopulate, whatnot, and then rule humanity in a controlled way. And then it's like, okay, so evil, right? Dead Reckoning, the whole movie, I think it's evil. By the end of the final movie, like, Tom Cruise's character is holding on to it like a little baby egg or something, like, it's innocent again or something. It's like exactly what you just described. It's that a computer came up with this necessity to do evil, and we have to accept that AI will somehow inevitably do this to us, and just we'll all prepare for it. So what kind of themes we're talking about. WALL-E, for example, has that, and that's a children's movie. So you wouldn't expect such dystopian themes of depopulation and AI control to constantly exist in all the movies. So when there's a consistent trend, it's, I think, safe to say that it's potential. There's an agenda behind it. Even if it's, I'll give an example here. On this website, joyoffaith.com, this Christian website, I have a link to an explanation of predictive programming. I used to link to other websites. All those links are dead. It's usually a guy that had a website on an edu website that was suspended. It's usually what I've seen. And websites and universities tend to be the kinds of places that will suspend for those kinds of reasons. So I get it. But it just makes me have to find a new website so now I found one that's on a Christian site that has the same stuff. It's this ancient quote from someone named Daria Beaver. I'm not really sure about it, but this person describes predictive programming as a tactic to reduce resistance to something that might be coming. And what's interesting about this page, and I can drop a link if you want, and I can also share my screen if you need. What's interesting to me, this one is most of the article goes on to say that there really is no basis for predictive programming in movies at large, that it's a rare phenomenon, but that they admit that there's certain things that are just undeniable. And 9/11 was one of them. And they can't really figure out why 9/11 was such a reoccurring theme before the actual 9/11 event. Like, I don't have to get into too many examples because I'm sure everyone's heard of one, but let's just list one example. Simpsons, they see the a pamphlet or something, screenshot of Lisa holding a cup. Cup's dollar says $9.11 and two towers in the back. So it's just stuff like that. It's uncanny. And then Back to the Future has it too, and going all day. Terminator 2, I love that one. That's awesome. So even the most skeptical people I've seen who agree that predictive programming is a literature rich sort of phenomenon. It has, like, you can find it a lot in London in MI6 documents and stuff. It's not just a theory. It's a basis, for accusing these corporations, these industry leaders, of having agendas. And that the 9/11 one was so undeniable that these critics even suggest there must have been a reason for that. Maybe that 9/11 was sort of, they knew it was going to be inevitable, so they wanted to just make sure that people weren't so upset when it finally happened. I remember hearing that theory since 2001. I remember that's an old one. Just to, that's us trying to rationalize, because we have seen that. So I say that it goes so much further than that. If you tie all the world affairs together, you'll see that there's an undeniable connection between movie predictive programming and reality, and an actual the dubious plausibility of reality.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show.
One perfect example is the Israeli nuclear weapons. Our entire lives, we've been told that since there's been no official disclosure of those weapons, that they don't officially exist. And that the story was that Israel got them from France in the 70s, in between one of their major wars, deciding that if they didn't have that kind of deterrence, that they would be overwhelmed by Arab states. So that's history, but surprise, surprise, in Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, in like 6 different shots and 6 different paced parts of the movie, we see the Israeli flag symbol on a nuclear weapon. Now, I've never seen that before. And this is a fresh movie. And the only reason I even saw this movie is because I waited for streaming and I pirated it. Not going to pay
Psychological
for something like
brainwashing, man. That's what it partially is. And I mean,
Right.
just to throw in this aspect of things too, I mean, Obama ended up re-legalizing propaganda on U.S. citizens during his, when he was in office. So, I mean, any of this type of stuff, I mean, they definitely have some plausible deniability. And even within that aspect, I mean, even if they full-blown are doing this stuff, they can still deny it because they can say that it's part of a secret government operation. You know what I mean? So it's like, you never have any solid validity to it.
Right. And sometimes the truth is just slippery, like the industrial military complex, for example, is portrayed in these movies as having run amok and become a loose cannon for a very long time, probably since their inception. And, inception like Revolutionary War, I mean. And if that's, the case, if there's any truth to this, then a government official can plausibly deny that we were actually involved in much of anything. And a perfect example would be the bunkers in Gaza City, which, if you look at the history of that, we helped Israel build those bunkers underneath hospitals with surveillance equipment back in the 80s, actually. And some people suggest that maybe that certain people are hoping that an enemy would start to use them as an enemy base to create a pretense for actually bombing hospitals, which everyone sort of realized would be the final long-term conclusion of an inevitable war in that region. So if that's true, and we've seen other things like that around the world, for example, Iran was surprised that we're at war with Iran when we've mucked with them for so long. We built those nuclear stations in the 1950s. We supported the Shah, and then we supported the overthrowing of that same leader by the Ayatollah, who we also supported, $1 million by CIA just for propaganda alone. And now we're at war with them. It's like, well, maybe we set that up. Maybe we actually set up everything. Maybe we set up, say, nuclear refineries in the Iranian mountains. Not stuff necessarily that's under the control of any of the Iranians. Why not? We built all the nuclear stations, right? America did. So it's not far-fetched to say the industrial complex agents, leaders, decided at some point to offshore some of this equipment over here, and suddenly you have the pretense for a major world war.
It's like setting up the dominoes and then just waiting for somebody to knock them over. Even within movies, man, talking about how sometimes these events can be seen before they actually happen, it kind of makes you wonder if it's a psychological thing, that it's not that the events have happened or anybody predicted it. It's a matter of they start showing stuff in movies to start getting that wrapped into people's heads. So if they have enough movies where every single time you see New York, you got the Twin Towers, then of course, if anybody goes to have any attack on New York, the first thing they're going to think of is the Twin Towers. So you're psychologically putting it in their head. So it's kind of like the chicken or the egg concept. And everybody who throws this theory always says that, oh, they must be predicting the future. Again, the whole occult magic about showing people what, is going to happen. It may not be in the aspect of people think of like magic, but rather the psychology aspect that if you put an image enough in somebody's mind, then when that moment comes that you set up these dominoes, they're going to see that image and knock over the dominoes.
Exactly. And that's why it's called predictive, because it's predicting events that everyone's going to eventually see, and programming because it programs you to have a certain reaction or not a reaction to it. The other side of the coin for predictive programming, in my opinion, is controlled opposition projects. And the only reason I say that is because they come hand in hand, and without both, well, you would not have it wouldn't have a workable solution. And 9/11 is a perfect example. Again, it's the best example I think we'll ever have. I mean, I do believe that, say, Pearl Harbor is a false flag, but we don't have any good examples of why that might be the case. 9/11, just a myriad. And one thing that happened right after 9/11, the thing that sort of, kind of blew my mind as a sort of young, impressionable, naive, pro-establishment. I'm a dual American Israeli, so I really was part of the pro-establishment for a long time until I sort of lost faith. And part of that reason was because I saw that Loose Change documentary, and it simply begged the basic question, could the military have done this? And so a lot of people accuse Loose Change of being controlled opposition because it got so much wrong. And then many critics of it said that they essentially derailed the entire truth movement, 9/11 truth movement. I think it's even sneakier than that. It's like the people who were, well, let me just line this whole thing up. I don't know if I got into my 9/11 theory last time. Do you remember if I did?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit at the tail end of the last episode.
So I'm not going to go into that. But I do believe that we're seeing very powerful influences here on both sides. Those that wanted to prepare us for this, essentially prepare America for terrorism before terrorism finally reached our shores, versus people who were essentially trying to prevent people from going to war at all. Most of the people, the majority of our government, constantly trying to stop wars, and then there's people within our government that are starting them, saying this is good for America. We've heard this our whole lives. So there's that's a very thin cut influence there, where people are willing to cause something like 9/11 in order to create a pretense to actually create what was called the Greater Israel Project, which was a declassified document from the CIA that described essentially the motivation for why 9/11 was necessary. And I said in my last cast that essentially 9/11 was also done by people who wanted to make sure America wouldn't eventually fall victim to that terrorism that's causing so much chaos in Europe, and wanted to inoculate us against. So you can see both sides of the argument, good and bad people joining on, and then afterwards, nobody willing to talk about it. Not good people, not bad people. No one wants to talk about 9/11 because it benefited sort of both sides. It was like a giant compromise. So anyway,
I've learned with a lot of this stuff, though, it seems like, you would assume that, the mainstream establishment would definitely be the ones that are controlling the mainstream narrative. But it seems like with a lot of this stuff, when you really start digging into it, they don't just control the mainstream narrative, they control the majority of the counter narrative too. And the intention with that is that they can start muddying the waters, or they can start spinning stuff how they want to make it look like it's way more ridiculous than it was, or they'll start trying to throw out hoaxes, or have people that are saying this is a theory, and then have somebody else come out and say that all their stuff's a hoax to try to disprove the conspiracy movement. I've noticed this with a lot of podcasts, with a lot of stuff, man, that it seems like I mean, like look at like the mainstream, like counterculture that you're looking at now. Like they're definitely controlled opposition, and it's like undeniable at this point. In order to be able to control both, it's that whole chaos theory. In order to control everybody, you have to be able to control both factions. Like there's order within chaos, and that's exactly what they try to do with this stuff. So you think that by the counterculture, you're being anti-establishment, but actually you're just falling into exactly what the establishment intended for you to do. And one of my best ways to describe this is go back to the 60s, to the hippie movement. Everybody thinks that they were going anti-war. They were actually falling into exactly what the establishment wanted them to do, because you had half of the group that would go out and fight these wars that they wanted, and then the other half that they didn't want to have to worry about or have to worry about starting up riots or anything like that. They kept them busy following around bands, taking drugs, and thinking that they were doing something to help the counterculture. So they're controlling both sides of the movement, just people didn't realize it till years later. And realistically, as part of the counterculture, if you're following around a band doing drugs, you're not doing anything to fight your movement. All you're doing is just trying to keep yourself off to the side, so you're actually helping the establishment to not have to worry about you.
Right. I agree. The tricky part, I think, is that we are not given nearly enough tools or facts to decipher the difference between, black and white, up or down here. This is everyone's acting and looking the same, and we end up having to put faith in people like, Donald Trump, for example, who nobody wants to trust. Essentially makes it very difficult for us to know where the truth lies. But as I said earlier, I think there is some things that we can sort of tell, and a lot of people have woken up to this recently. I've seen plenty of articles and plenty of people who would agree that the deep state is experiencing a real shakeup right now. Not like we've seen like last year or even before in our lifetime. It probably did happen in history, though. I won't deny that, but not in our lifetime, and definitely not in the last couple of world wars. They've been sinking their teeth into us for a long time. And now we're seeing a shakeup, meaning things are really, really changing in a way they will not change back. And the deep state really operates in a slow process, slow and go, like a giant corporation that's really inefficient, but gonna stick around forever, like Microsoft or the industrial military complex. And the only way to like defeat something like that is, you just have to know it really well, And for those people that eventually did understand what it's going to take, they understood that it's going to take someone like Trump, because he's completely outside of our government and therefore uncompromised by it, and sort of has the assets to run what I'll just call his own shadow government if he needs to. He can essentially compete with our government. He can run his own government with his own assets just as well as ours, because our government is so freaking obsolete and just broken and fighting itself. It's not hard, actually. That you and I and everyone we know could run our government better than the old guard and establishment. So that's the thing that I think is discernible. We can see now that for whatever reason, this so-called deep state has revealed itself in recent times in a desperate attempt to align itself against whatever it is that's happening that's shaking it up, and goes so far beyond Trump that Trump just offers this protective umbrella for all these other like little tiny countries and stuff to start having their own mini MAGA revolutions, if you follow. And
all over Europe, that's like the main thing all over Europe.
Right. And that had nothing to do with how good the laws or judges and stuff working. That's just a human leadership thing. It's about intimidation. It's about, not having enough numbers at the right time. So when I'm saying that things have really aligned, we can see that certain people have exposed themselves. Like in Israel, for example, I'm more or less a fan of Bibi. I know he's going to go down as a sort of monster, but I understand that his heart has always been trying to prevent this horrible Greater Israel project from happening, because it would mean the blood of so many Israelis and people he knows. While right next to him, I forget his name, with the SH, Interior Minister, is just a warmonger who's pushing Bibi to do everything he's had to do. And it's just like Lincoln said. Lincoln had a quote of the same thing. Lincoln said he's wary about those Southerners, but he's even equally as wary of the bankers who had supported the Northerners in the Civil War. He said that. Lincoln was just as wary of those bankers who was funding his army. It's like, I don't know if those guys are better people, and if they win, I don't know. That's what Lincoln said. Guess they shot him.
Yeah, too much longer later, they ended up starting up the Federal Reserve. What was that, 1913?
Bingo.
So
Right. And it almost looks like him and Kennedy and people were holding stuff back, but actually those guys were going to do what they wanted. Lincoln and so forth were their puppets. Just so good that we had at least that quote. It's like, yep, even he was afraid of it. And we know that Bibi's like that. He's actually trying to hold all of his fellow warhawks back from that project because, well, I mean, you guys saw those missiles, right? The stuff that's happened since our last podcast, the so-called 12-day war between Israel and Iran. So a term that Trump coined in an attempt to end the war. He said on the final day, he said this war is over, and it sort of worked, I guess. Iran was just going nuts, but they calmed down, and Israel's, they stopped bombing. They were bombing nuclear facilities, and they stopped. So we see that Bibi was in this position that's much more complicated than we thought. We can't just take sides against him or for him, because if we do remove him in the end, like all those protesters want, then when someone else is going to take over, and it'll be terrible. And so we saw this aligning. And then in the Ukraine-Russia war, we saw, of course, the propaganda campaign sort of fall completely apart, where even our corporations in our schools and stuff were saying, we support Ukraine. It's almost unreal that happened, and it's sort of like a bad memory. It's just like COVID, like how those news anchors were attacking people who didn't want to vaccinate. It's unimaginable only a few years later. But that's what happened. We had everyone saying, we support Ukraine against Russia. Next thing happened, I don't know if it's 1.7 million Ukrainian soldiers died or fled. I don't know, but the numbers are in the millions for their losses. And all for what? There's no territory changes yet. So, well, do we still support Ukraine here? It's like now it's a really touchy, dirty subject. You don't see it appearing in the election anymore. It's not an issue on the midterms anymore. Like there doesn't seem to be any issues on the midterms, like at all, because Democrats have lost the platform entirely. But what's really interesting about the Democratic Party, and I've been predicting this, you might have heard me say this, that I do believe it's dead. It's gone. It's just life support. No one's realized it yet. It has a major propaganda wing keeping it, fresh seeming. But I think it was Chris Cuomo who posted on whatever that news article page he does, either New York Times or something. He said only last month, the Democratic Party is dead. Please, everyone, let's just walk away now. He said, this is not the party of my father. We would have never gone this direction with immigrants. We used to be about the little guy. Immigrant used to be a little guy. They're not anymore. I think the times changed, et cetera, et cetera. So we're seeing so much change in the last few months, like shaking of the foundations that the deep state is used to enjoying, scheming upon. And just one last example is the meeting that Trump had with the EU leaders. After meeting Putin in Alaska, which was only last week, it's happened so fast, at the exact same time, Zelensky, of course, took a Europe trip and said, we're going to have to do something about, Trump's meeting with Putin to counter any effects it might have. And like all this kind of weak rallying, a little bit of money and promises. And one promise extracted from Trump was, you're definitely meeting with me after Putin, right? And Trump said yes. And so they met, and they said, and Trump said, don't worry, guys, we're not going to give Russia everything. And the EU leaders said, okay, so what's the next step? Trump said, I'm going to meet with Putin to describe all of the stuff you guys just told me in this meeting here. And they said, okay, so they literally were going to leave. This is what I heard from one of the anonymous sources that was reporting. Everyone was basically getting up to leave when Trump said, let's call Putin now. And he basically picked up the phone and did call Vladimir Putin and said, here's what these guys have just told me. I mean, of course, that's how you make a good peace deal. But why haven't we seen this before? We never saw even Republican presidents do this kind of thing before. And Nixon, I'm a fan of, but he never did anything like this. His reset was slow and go and actually very awkward, culture clash between us and Russia. But in this case, it's not because, hey, I respect Trump, or hey, wow, smart guy. Again, you and I would have done this. What is it? It's basically about, he knows, and everyone who's gotten behind him in the last 10, 20 years knows that doesn't matter who you vote for president. They're going to go and they're going to Biden their way through these wars like we're used to. And they're going to have no idea how to stop them. Again, Nixon, you watched that movie from Oliver Stone, you'll see the signature scene is when, his own Secret Service accidentally routed him directly into a crowd of protesters. They do this. They still do this these days. Just, they almost got Trump killed in that one rally. And for Nixon's case, they could have whacked him with signs, but instead they just asked him a simple question. Why aren't you stopping this war? You promised to stop the war when you were, when we voted for you. And he said, it's so complicated. And they're just like, fine, whatever, And that's the point of the movie. I mean, I don't like Oliver Stone, but that's a piece of history saying that, it doesn't matter who you voted for. It's all preordained by the deep state, choreographed months, years ahead. People are either born or raised into it. Obama, for example, totally born and raised to be president. I don't think there's any doubt about that now. We were all counting on him to do the thing that's not normal. He went and did all the things that were very typical of even Republican presidents in the past.
And he did a bunch of messed up policies while smiling and waving over here and then signing all this messed up stuff behind closed doors. Like, it wasn't until after his presidency that everybody realized that, again, he legalized propaganda for U.S. citizens. He let in more immigrants in the country than anybody else. Like, I think he had... Yep. He had a couple other records that were like ridiculous that you wouldn't expect out of him. But yeah, it was just all this stuff didn't come out of the wash till afterwards.
Yeah. He
smile and nod and look over here.
Exactly. Laid a foundation for amnesty, and then Trump reversed it, and then Biden set it back in motion, and Trump reversed it. And people have become cynical because they figure that this iteration is not going to be the end of anything. That's going to be like it's going to cycle the rest of our lives, perhaps. That's why I've always referred to the Matrix movies as the best analogy for reality, because the Matrix movies involve a cycling where the machines keep trying to reset, try different ways to make people happy and fail, and then try something entirely different. And I do believe reality is exactly like that. And we're approaching the very, very end. There's so many signs. Like, again, Mission Impossible, I'm going to bring it up because these movies, they speak to me in their predictive programming now. It's not like before when it was subtle and tasteful and I could actually plausibly be denied on it. Not like that anymore. Like Stargate. Excellent programming. But now
all the multi-dimensional movies, like every single thing has something to do with that and tries to normalize the concept of possibly breaking into other dimensions and breaking the laws of physics and everything. So they're trying to normalize the concept of pushing science a bit too far.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It'll end good in the end because we'll have this bad event that'll happen, but it'll end it positively for all of us because that's what happens in all the movies, right?
Positively for the chosen people. I think that was the message of almost every movie.
Yep. Pretty good programming, man. Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. And now back to the show.
There's always like a sacrifice, and there's always often a blackifice. It's just how they like it. That's the kind of thing I mean by tasteful. Back in the day, they would do that, but they would do tasteful, mostly because it was kind of still new. And now they do it, and it's not tasteful anymore. It's like, why'd you have to do that? It's annoying, kind of. Like me and my wife joke about how there's in these modern sci-fi oriented movies, there's almost always a Vasquez character. It's almost always a Alien 2 type of posse group, and one of them is always that one, military female with the tank top.
Oh, and she's always got super strength, too. She's usually a species that has super strength, so she's stronger than the guys. I can name 5 shows with a character like that. Orville being one of them.
Right. If you want to get into shows, then you're talking about a lot more examples. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
But sci-fi as a whole, there's always that character. I know exactly what you're talking about.
You're right. So that's what I mean by no longer tasteful, kind of obvious. Maybe a lot of that is the way they focus group and heavily rely on post-production these days. So that they can't be blamed essentially for any faults in the movie anymore. They've kind of made a science out of it.
I mean, they do a lot of stuff with like DEI type stuff with a lot of these sci-fi movies where a lot of the different species they just use for analogies of like other races. And then you have the aspect of them like having hybrids where there's like intercourse happening between people. And either one, I mean, it's a metaphor for, interracial couples, or it's a metaphor for the whole concept of normalizing the concept of having a relationship with other things, such as the movement we're having towards people having relationships with AI, or if there is some type of extraterrestrial type thing, normalizing the concept of, having intercourse with that. But either way you look at it, I mean, it's normalizing a weird concept that is something,
You're right. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. I think we're only beginning to study it. I don't think enough people have taken it seriously to start mapping all this out. It should be very useful. A perfect example of that, I think, the Independence Day resurgence, a sort of just everyone forgot that there was a sequel to that Independence Day movie. But one of the side characters was obsessed with this astronaut girl because, well, he never says why, but she happens to be Asian. So we get this implication that he's obsessed with this exotic Asian girl. So that is not the only time I've seen it. It's just the most obvious time. But it's exactly what you're describing, telling us American demographics because it's usually like, white, blonde kids, whatever, redheads, telling them, don't date within your demographic, date outside your demographic. It wouldn't be a problem if they just did it as part of a plot, but it sticks out only because we noticed that it's not plot oriented. And that's where I think you get all the Republicans and conservatives screaming about Hollywood saying that scene broke me wrong because it made me feel like, I'm being insulted in this way or that way. And they'd be right, because that's what focus grouping is. Eventually, if you're going to focus group within, 100 or 1,000 people, they're going to have that one person who says that. So you'd think that they would know all of these lessons by now. And the fact that they're not learning their own lessons, in my opinion, means that they're not necessarily evolving forward. They're just maintaining a system of control, which is what I figure Hollywood was to begin with. Just another system of control, never meant to be, free expression.
I mean, kind of continuing with that, I mean, I almost kind of wonder often if we don't realize it, but we're pushing into a more authoritarian state than we realize, even in the aspect of, you've had this continuous thing with people always giving up freedom of speech, where they're like, oh, we shouldn't be allowed to say that, we shouldn't be able to say this word, we shouldn't be able to say that word, where it's gotten to the point where there's a lot of podcasts that it's like, you'll listen to true crime, like I was mentioning on our show recently, and you can't even say half of the literal words for things. Like, you keep pushing this concept of making it so that people basically ask for that to be taken away. Like, prime example, talking about media. You get to a point with media where they've just put so much of the woke agenda into it that people just don't want it anymore. Like, wouldn't that possibly be the intention? Is it's a way to get rid of, like, the arts and get rid of media by getting people to a point where they just say, you know what, we don't agree with this anymore, we don't want it. And it's a subconscious way of destroying the arts, because you're tricking people into getting rid of it rather than just saying, no more arts for you guys. Because that's part of the whole authoritarian concept, is that, you get rid of the arts, you get rid of freedom of expression, you unify everybody, make everybody the same. And even with the making everybody the same concept, I mean, look at the counterculture from the 90s. That's become like the mainstream culture today, where all these things that people did to stand out, like tattoos, dyeing their hair, all that stuff, that's become the mainstream. So those aren't individual concepts anymore. It's becoming part of a uniform concept of people.
Right. I think that was the uniformitarianism of it is part of the goal. If we lose our what's different, distinct about us, we're far more easy to control. And it's sort of like a cut the high poppy strategy, where they even are trying to make little girls feel like they're not pretty in kids' cartoons and movies. Just all kinds of just weird gaslighting, I would say. And I can't imagine that any of it's for anything other than control. So anyway, I already said that. I was going to tie this to the main reason why I think they're doing this, because I don't think that this kind of thing is sustainable. I think obviously too many people have called it out for too many years, and now it's sort of just being railroaded. It's forced, because we haven't forced Hollywood to give up their control, so they're forcing us to, be fed their formula. This is really going to be like a states' rights sovereignty issue. If you really think about the kind of influence that Hollywood has still, and its control over all of the streaming networks. Remember, this all started a long time ago with the FBI and those CIA warnings, really intimidating stuff, telling us that we cannot copy and we cannot distribute. And in that intimidation, Hollywood made sure to monopolize the way that movies would always be distributed forever. So the kind of bills that are coming out now, like in Texas, to create a movie industry, are coming with a lot of modern legal concepts that break through this myriad of red tape corporate bureaucracy that's preventing us from, essentially having First Amendment rights in this country. If you really think about it, our inability to share movies is a violation of the First Amendment. And they get away with this because they say you're going to make money. But if you don't make money, it should be covered by Creative Commons and fair use. These laws do exist. And for some reason, if you do try to distribute a movie for free, you will absolutely get, annihilated. I'm only saying for some reason because, this isn't the case necessarily with game ROMs. This isn't the case with video game music or remixes. I was part of a video game music remix website that distributed for a very long time and it's still around now, and it has not gotten in any trouble. So I figure there's a lot of precedents here that just don't add up. Libraries, for example, have always distributed movies for free, without paying, without asking permission.
Not to mention, I actually recently discovered that a lot of public libraries literally have an app that you can download movies, audiobooks, all of that stuff off of, completely free.
Bingo.
So it's almost like a Netflix thing. Like I just downloaded one the other day called Hoopla from my public library. Like literally, you can check out whatever you want. Like they're definitely distributing books, movies, CDs, all that stuff for absolutely free.
I'm glad you agree because that used to be a right that we had, and it's like, well, it's still there. We just don't know because we've been so intimidated against this, and it's preserved somewhere in the legal system. Where? Probably libraries, right? I'm actually going to be investigating that. I said recently to my wife, I'm going to check that out because I'm actually interested. I'm interested in distributing movies in the future for free, nonprofit. No, never making any profit, but it's our right to cut these movies up.
Leave them even in their true format, because people are noticing a lot with a lot of Netflix stuff that in certain countries they're cutting certain scenes out of movies or certain words out of movies and stuff. So it's like, even just to have the ability just to keep them in full tact so that nobody else modifies them.
Bingo. That to me is just too much power, too much influence. It's not just some subtle, that happenstance, like, oh, they just happen to get their first kind of thing. This is very deliberate and very intimidating. And
this is why you should get solid copies. That goes for books, but it's also starting to go for media and movies now. I always tell people now, if you're a big book person, if you have a lot of favorite movies that are 70s, 80s, 90s, get copies of them now, because it's only a matter of time before they start cutting scenes out of them, especially if they're more edgy stuff, like, X-Files, stuff like that. Now that Disney owns X-Files, dude, I guarantee you that there's going to start being a lot of weird stuff cut out of those episodes.
You're right. There has been a lot of PP in the X-Files stuff that they wish didn't exist. They're probably not going to show. Blu-rays are a perfect example of this because Blu-rays didn't get a pure transition from DVD. It was a horrible, horrible mess. I'll give you one example of something kind of shocking I found out recently about Panasonic Blu-ray drives that they stopped making them.
Yep.
In 2024.
Yep.
And that now they went like gold and now they're gone. And the only ones that make them are LG and the other white labels LG, brands, because they're a huge fake corporation made of many different corporations and parts. And it's just pretty much well known that their Blu-ray drives do not read consistently. So if we have apocalypse and EMF, destroys all of our hard drives and magnetic data, which is a plot of many movies, by the way, like that stupid Ice Cube War of the Worlds movie that came out.
I didn't even watch that because it looked so goddamn bad.
I know.
Not only did they took a book that was originally from the late 1800s, they tried to update it, but they didn't update the book. They updated the radio broadcast of the book. So they did like a remake of the remake. That's just asking for awful.
and stuff that Spielberg introduced is now stuck in the lore. It's just too frustrating for a World of the Worlds fan like me. But I noticed all the side plots of that movie, and one of them was that the AI will delete all of our Facebook photos. And in one scene, Ice Cube's sad Ice Cube looking at all his family photos being deleted forever. And it's just what a freaking lame plot. But they've said it so many times now.
That's AI's first intention, and aliens' first intention. They get to Earth, they're going to delete our photos.
Yeah. So it just occurred to me, we don't really have any good options here. If you put your stuff on hard drives and bury them in a hole in your backyard, they could probably fry in a big enough EMF hit. Just standard electromagnetic potential that's out there. I'm not saying it can happen, but say those 5G towers, that's probably enough to do it. Secondly, if they were to back up all their media on DVDs, they would have real size issues, and if they put on Blu-rays, they might never read it again. I mean, this is a serious problem. You think somebody would have solved it by now. In fact, yet another plot point of Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. They held up this new hard drive in front of the camera, several times in the movie. Check this out. It's a new type of 3D optical drive. Yeah, okay, yeah, I remember hearing articles about that in the 90s. Why has it not come out yet? I'll tell you why. Because optical is not susceptible to EMF waves, and it can contain infinite amount of data, or what is known in sci-fi as the infinitely indexed database, which does appear in several different sci-fi. So point is, yeah, of course this stuff exists. And of course, there's something that we can hold in our hand that can back up all of our family photos forever and survive the apocalypse. In fact, I do believe that ancient times, such technology was used literally with just crystals and stuff without any technology at all, just, telepaths and crystals. But in modern times, they're just dangling it in front of us in these movies. It's too often for us to deny that it's possible now. So yes, I do believe that that's part of the plan to deliberately erase all of our data. Once you realize the likelihood of that kind of thing, that's the significance of how necessary it is, of how they actually want to erase a lot of this stuff that we've seen, like 9/11, for example. That didn't go very well, and a lot of 19th century, 20th century history is full of black spots that have not been talked about in school, like the colonization history of, say, Germany, France, and England and in Africa, that kind of stuff, just completely denied. Or Britain's famine in India. I mean, sure, we've heard about the marches and we've heard all about Gandhi, but we don't know anything about the reality of 19th, 20th century, just horrors. And so stuff like that, that's the real thing that I think they want gone. They want to erase everything in such a reset that by the time anyone ever pieces it together, such things like mud flood and false flags, for example, will never be an issue again. They will have a simple, clear, a self-referencing version of history that is then the only version of history available and the only copy of movies that you can get.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to that deep conversation you crave.
Blu-ray didn't just ruin our ability to store data. I was also going to say Blu-ray movies are not showing the same movies that we saw on DVDs. A good example, Dumb and Dumber. One awesome movie, but the Blu-ray is different. It's unrated too, and it has scenes that are just hateable. It really ruins the pacing. It's not an accident. They're not a big fan of Jim Carrey anymore, so they're just not favoring him right now.
Even to throw in Star Wars too. You can't find the original 70s versions very easily anymore. Maybe you can find them on some obscure VHSs, but you're not going to find any new recent stuff. Even the concept that people think of remastering old movies, it's like you think it's a good thing, you assume it's a good thing, but it's taking away half of the original movie. Like you go and try to watch original Star Trek now, it's like all of the scenes have been updated from the middle, and when they update, how hard is it to take scenes out? And in the process of that, just to throw in another thing about movies, how many movies from when we were a kid, from like the 70s and 80s that were like popular, 70s, 80s, 90s, that were popular, they've never made into a DVD or Blu-ray version. So you essentially can't find a copy to be able to convert unless you have a VHS of it that you can convert to a digital copy. Like there's already movies that are lost.
Yeah. One just undeniable example would be Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Another totally forgotten movie that even the Square Enix company has derided as nothing more than a marketing campaign, which had nothing to do with games. Anyone that's a fan of the movie knows it real well, knows it's not true, and it's based very much on the lore and ideology of the series, blah, blah. When they made a Japanese version, they made a special Japanese version called Spiritual Edition, DVD. And it's a Japanese, like a sort of anime, as made by a bunch of people in Japan, or a bunch of Japanese people in Hawaii, in Square Studio. And so you'd think that much like the game series and Dragon Quest has been a major event in their country where they'll shut the schools down when it launches and stuff, you would think that they would get a Blu-ray version of this movie. And it doesn't exist. There's no Blu-ray version of the Japanese Spiritual Edition. And so that means there is no Blu-ray version with the Japanese audio at all. available. That I think is just too odd. And what I've realized is that it's a lot more complicated than just making a new copy. They'd have to go back and they'd consult people and give them credit. So I don't know if you're familiar with the movie, but what happened in post-production is they went and took a bunch of American actors like Alec Baldwin and Steve Buscemi, and they really just mucked it all up and they ruined it. The Japanese audio makes it into a much more like original vision. And without that original release on Blu-ray, it's like almost like Japan has forgotten this movie. So that's what got me into fan edits, because I was able to get a copy from Japan of the DVD and splice the audio in with that Blu-ray and get a restoration done for people. So I'm realizing that, this really is sort of an info war. And if we can't preserve things, then they're going to take them away. That Star Wars HD a restoration that you mentioned, probably one of the most famous fan restorations of all time, which came from a Laserdisc. The Laserdisc would survive an apocalypse, but would every copy of the fan restoration survive? I don't know. They would have had to burn it into a Laserdisc, or what I'm saying. It's the war is hot because there was a point in the future when they could actually go through with that plan. So what is the point? It was a point in the timeline where this suddenly becomes likely. The answer is, in all the predictive programming, we were supposed to go to war with Russia and its proxies in Iran, China, and a bunch I'm forgetting right now. And in these wars, there was going to be the type of weapons that would, in fact, cause that kind of thing to happen. And so what I'm saying is, the predictive programming wasn't very solid. It was sloppy as hell. It was breaking apart. It was 2 centuries of just huge mess. And if they could not get to that reset point, it was all for naught. It was a desperate, all or nothing project. And that's why I'm making the claim, and I'm sure it's kind of obvious at this point, that almost all the predictive programming that there ever existed since 16th century England's Protestantism, talking about a long time ago, has been about Russia, Russia, the country. And that sounds like it's just too simple and too biased an explanation, but it just is starting to really be appearing to me to be the truth. Everything and anything you can possibly imagine points to Russia. I just mentioned those 2 movies. They both have Russia-phobia in them. Even Sonic 2 has a whole scene where, they go to Siberia for no reason, meet a bunch of Russians who try to beat them up and eat them, and just they're overall just really mean. And this is all just leading up to this Ukraine war. It's just the timing of it. So
even Stranger Things, my daughter watches that super crazy popular show. They start bringing in that really hard Russian aspect in the later seasons too.
Exactly. And so that's where I believe you can really just trace the motivation for all this. We weren't supposed to be convinced. We're supposed to be divided and conquered so that it would lead up to this point. So then it just comes down to the last final question. What is it that they're so afraid of that Russia is doing that that we need all this, essentially this effort, worldwide effort to contain and consistently lie about them for over 6 centuries now? And that's where I get to my conclusions that there's really no way that we could have kept this kind of thing up that long. There has to have been some sort of deep state influence throughout human history to keep such a plan consistently going without falling apart and ending forever. Just they repaired it, they got what they needed, a war, assassination, whatnot, and it just all comes back to this old plan to destroy Russia. The one started by the Protestants back in the 16th century. And I'm just going to give you one quick example. I don't know if I covered this last time, probably not, about the Christian Bible that we know today. We think, a lot of Christians think that it's a fundamental version. It's a verbatim that hasn't been changed much since 2,000 years, the Bible. And a lot of wiser people would say it definitely changed a lot. King James Version, Sir Francis Bacon, probably why Everyone called Bacon that, because they're so mad at him for what he did.
I mean, just from going from the original languages into English, it's already been manipulated off of that because there's not direct words for a lot of things. There's things that are close, but they're not the exact words they were intending to use because that only exists in that language.
Exactly. And I think these people, I think people of those times, I should say, 16th century were definitely smart people. They were wise to these Latin speakers and their schemes, and they're turning the Bible into Latin was not good because they'll translate back out of Latin into who knows what. So the idea that the Bible is verbatim, essentially, the part that I may not have covered before is this one story that I read recently from Anatoly Shumenko in his letters to critics in 2012. He was describing this Ship of Fools, which is a Protestant play that originated in Germany, I believe 17th century. And it is such a huge linchpin to me for what happens to make Christianity from what it was to what it is today, this silly version that we have. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's a silly version. It's a Christianity we know today. The Bible that we consider verbatim is almost a childish and poorly constructed, poorly narrated, inconsistent and self-contradictory literature. No one doubts that. Well, was it always? No, it wasn't. And that's where I'm getting at. Somebody really had to take that big leap and just translate, from serious to silly. And that would not go over well with the population. So here's the story. It started as a Protestant plan originating in England, 17th century. And the plan made it to Germany, being the big artistic battlegrounds for culture in Europe at the time, where a lot of English had influence over the opera, the orchestra, and they sort of named celebrities from England that would tour the world and stuff. So one of the things that England ordered was a Protestant critique of the Bible. Historians today would say that would be the Latin Bible that the Roman Catholic Church made. Okay, fine. But I say that Fomenko is probably right about the Bible originating in Russia, and that version was Cyrillic, and it predated any Latin version. And if that's true, if his version is true, then part of the story he tells in the 17th century is that the Protestants ordered a mockery of the Bible. Please, somebody just go ahead and tell the same stories in a silly way. And they did. They made a vaudeville play out of it, and they went through scene by scene, including the crucifixion. They would have stories of, in the Old Testament stories, kings being stabbed with the sword, but those scenes were comic scenes, as opposed to serious. And they would sort of change the nature of so much stuff that would later become the Old and New Testaments that were, already written in some fashion beforehand. But obviously, that's why, as I said, this wouldn't go over well. The people that hated it the most were the Russians, and any kind of pro-Nestorian, Gnostic, Cathar version of original Christianity would find that abhorrent. Christians don't really go and they slaughter their enemies, but at some point, the Tsar of Russia, who himself, I do believe, I don't know if it was Peter, it was believed by many Russians at the time that he himself was a Western plant, that they kidnapped the real Tsar and replaced him. But that's beside the point. That same Tsar ordered the assassination of everyone associated with that play in Germany. And as you can see, Russia had a lot of influence. If they're ordering executions in Germany, one of their vassal states at the time, as the empire's in decline, and they're about to fall apart. 1773. So my point is that after the Bible was mocked, the people who mocked it were killed, and nobody remembers that. And because nobody remembers that one version, which the Protestants did print throughout the West, and they had the printing press, that version became the final version. As the King James version was translated from Latin And remember, Latin is a big art language. So you see a lot of operas and stuff in Latin when it's supposed to be a dead language no one speaks. So it's mysterious how the Bible went through Latin, came back out into English and all the other languages in its mockery format. And even Fomenko says, take this, lightly, because I know you'll be a lot of people out there would just close the book at this point and stop listening. But that really fit together for me. I don't believe that Christians are any good at defending the Bible, old or new. I don't believe Jews, Muslims are any better. It's, if you read much of it, it's just a huge, ridiculous joke. It's a mess. It's not even, you can't use it. It doesn't reference, it doesn't help you with your life. It doesn't tell you about history. It doesn't tell you where you come from. It doesn't tell you what happens. So this could only have happened in a way like that. It could not have happened by somebody literally writing down the silly version, the Santa Claus version of it, that it happened from war. Everything that bad in our world happened from war. That's what the Crusades were, after all. It were people knocking each other over the head and saying, you're going to believe this from now on, the end. So that's my point, is that Russia became this huge key, this just secret to our real history, not because they're so great. They had a horrible time with horrible leaders. They're just like everywhere else on Earth. The peasants suffered. And the only real difference is that some people pay for truth a lot more than others.
Inquiries About Reality will return after this quick commercial break. And we are back, so let's hop right in.
I'll go back to that 19th century Britain and controlling India thing. Those Indians paid dearly because they knew something about themselves. A theory that I haven't really seen much, but has basis in new chronology, in Fomenko's belief that the Bering Strait existed much more recently than uniformitarian theorists believe, and that people who crossed over that strait wound up in India, not 100,000 years ago, but sometime in the last 10 centuries. That those Indians remembered their past, that they came from America of all places, which is why they're called Indians. And India was called America at the time. And like I said, they had to pay the hardest price. There's a lot of examples of other people paying prices, but not for that. If you ever watched the movie Burn with the Godfather guy, I forget his name, the actor.
What's that guy's name?
Marlon Brando.
Yep, there it is.
If you watch Burn with Marlon Brando, I recommend it. It's true story about what we did to the Caribbean islands when the black slaves resisted us. And by us, I mean the colonists. They paid the price for trying to have a revolution. They burned the entire island and every tree on it. I do believe that when you see something like that, you have to look for why, what was the price? Why was that price so great? And in America, we have the Dust Bowl. So the story was that we cut the trees down to make farms, even though, one can laugh at the possibility, at the idea that we could possibly think that we could cultivate, some 5,000 or 100,000 square miles of land. But besides that, we did burn down every single tree. So all I'm saying is, look at that movie. If that's the real history, the one they don't want to teach in schools, we can start to extrapolate it and figure out the real 19th century, 20th century history. Everyone who got wiped out paid a price for the truth they knew. And here in America, it was the West Coast Native Americans and whatever it was they had here, some kind of advanced civilization with the monuments, the pyramids and whatnot. All we see now are melted ruins. So something about them caused them to pay a major price, more than, Aborigines in Australia. They paid the price much later. Got wiped out slowly later. Gypsies, they're still sort of paying the price, right? They became a diaspora, got chased away from wherever they came from. The clue is not Egypt, it's Russia. So I'm just saying, you can basically figure out where everyone got in trouble or wiped out, every demographic in the last couple centuries, by what truth had to be preserved. Again, Mission Impossible, Final Reckoning had a scene where the president was being advised by the generals that it would be necessary for the United States to nuke one of its own cities as a gesture to make sure the other cities don't actually go to war when America bombs AI in all of the cities around the world, blah, 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 blah. So my point is that there's constantly this conclusion that, oh, I'm sorry, we have no choice. There's no other way. We're going to have to ABC. And because of that, I think history is literally riddled with unexplainable wipeouts, like the Yiddish Jews in the Holocaust. They're clearly targeted for their Russianness. They're clearly not targeted if they were already Western and integrated with Western values. So again, my conclusion was that everything points to Russia, who had seemed to have paid the biggest price of all. That their country was destroyed, and that Siberia is all that remains of it. That is all that remains of the targeted locations, and that the part of Russia that was not targeted is actually in Europe. And that was part of the plan, to make Russia pay so dearly that it would be regulated into the tiniest space possible and offshored as far away from its homeland, the motherland, as possible, and then integrated with the West as far as possible, hit with Islamic terrorism as far as possible, hit with ideological psyop gaslighting, like the Muslims, for example, who were told by the British, who showed up out of nowhere in places like Afghanistan in 19th century and said, you guys have nothing to do with Russia, even though your history says so. And the Quran locations aren't in Russia, they're in the other locations. And your history ties back to that desert, Saudi Arabia, and this little mosque in the middle of nowhere that was clearly moved there recently. And within the 18th century, it was put there. And the British convinced that the Arabs had entirely no connection to the Russians. The Chinese had entirely no connection either. And that the Arabs should actually wage Islamic terrorism against Russia and all of its Baltic states. They've experienced the worst terrorism of all. They had planes crash into skyscrapers in the 90s. And it wasn't CGI that time. And we didn't talk about it, here in the West, because that was sort of our ancient Western plan to continue to divide them and conquer them by any means necessary. So we haven't seen this anywhere else but Russia. We see a lot of the tactics, but it all sort of just paints back and points back to this giant, need to erase the true history of it's not really Russia that's being erased here, but Christianity. Because after all, Christianity is the biggest system of control of all. I should say Judeo-Christianity, or rather just simplify it down to monotheism or Abrahamism. There's a lot of ways to put it, but a lot of ways to slice it. And that control system, which is so massive, think Latin America and stuff, would totally shatter if Russia wasn't defeated. So they have to keep just next World War III, World War IV. And it does seem to me that the good players have figured out this, the DNA of this. The antibodies necessary to fight this kind of mental virus. They're not going to allow World War III to end with another Cold War. If we do that, we will absolutely enter World War IV at some point in the future. And it probably won't even be our generation alive at that point. They'll do, they'll go as far as they need to and wait as long as they need to. They'll make us wait, and they'll wait us out. They think they're God, so they're going to do things that God did. Like the Israelites wiping out 90% of them in the desert during the Exodus because God felt they weren't loyal enough. That's how the deep state thinks of themselves. They would do that if they could. So
I'm almost kind of curious if they might try to do them back to back, just because they seems like they've been trying to speed stuff up a lot lately, and not to try to correlate it with like World War I and World War II and how soon those were after each other. But I almost feel like now, you could definitely go that way where we kind of take a minute and then come back. But I almost kind of wonder if we might even take the intention of go the first round. If that doesn't work, hard blast the second time, almost like they kind of tried to do with like COVID and everything like that. And if that doesn't work, then they kind of just dissipate back for a little bit, hit it hard all at once, just try to mess up people's minds. They don't really know what's happening.
Right, exactly. And it's because these plans were laid so far in the past, because they're predicted for so long, and they were supposed to happen quickly. This is not anyone's future to have kicked the can down the road for so long until the population has an opportunity to wake up like we're doing. That's not the plan. You can be sure of that. So what is the real plan here? The real plan is to stop the deep state plan, but it's unstoppable. You can't stop. All right. So then what do you do with an unstoppable plan? You make sure you get through every step of the plan with minimum casualties. and you make sure you keep your sovereignty. So back to contemporary events. One thing that happened about a month ago, about 2 months now, Iran was bombed by Israel. And Israel finally did what they were threatening to do for so long. They wanted America to bomb the nuclear facilities in the mountains in Iran, the ones that are allegedly refining uranium to 90%. Disclaimer, I do not believe that, refined uranium can make a bomb. I don't believe nuclear bombs at all. But
if anybody wants to go back and check it out, I think it was part 3 that we talked about the whole dirty bomb concept. If anybody wants to break that down a little bit more.
Exactly. And it's the dirty is the key word here, because here's the thing. When we were planning to bomb Iran, and pretty much every step of the campaign was known, even to John McCain back in the day when he would sing that bomb, bomb, bomb Iran song. He was privy to that ancient plan. Now it's ancient. Now it's 50 years old, maybe. And it's because people have known about this for so long, because it took so long to finally execute. We finally know what the real risks here are. So what was the problem? America was supposed to hit a location in a mountain that is unreachable by most of the contemporary bombs that do exist. And there is one kind of bomb that has been heavily advertised in the media called the bunker buster that America was going to be pressured into using in this inevitable Iran war. And it was. America was pressured. There was this moment of extreme pressure on Trump during that month, during one point when America finally agreed to join, that was the term the media used, to join the war against Iran, which just, you can see how slippery it is for America to join into wars other countries start, like France and Germany and, in 19th century and stuff. Just because we have entangling alliances, I think it was Woodrow that warned us about that, or who. It's so easy. And we knew that Israel was going to do this, and we knew that Israel was going to drag us into this war. And we had TV shows like Upload saying that soldiers would lose their war in the Iran war, and in that show, suggesting they would voluntarily suicide themselves afterwards in order to go live a life of virtual reality. That's how far along we've thought about these things. We meaning someone within our species. And in this case, in that moment, the media said, and now it's time for Trump to issue the command to strike. What do we think we're going to use? Well, here are the possible ordinances. This is one type of bunker buster. Here's another type. Here's one that we used in Iran. Here's one we used in Serbia. And it's like, oh, really? We don't usually talk about these things. The media is still sort of tight-lipped, but they let us know, finally, that we've been using these bombs negligently around the world, leading to radiation contamination, especially in Serbia, that is just like in the sci-fi books, will last 100 years maybe. It's killing animals and plants and infecting children and stuff. It's horrible. And we're supposed to use one of these on Iran now, like as their next. We hit Iraq with them, we did. We destroyed their airport, and then we moved all of the soil out so that we could bring our own workers there without getting contaminated. So it's just everyone that was watching saw this thing happening and knew it was inevitable. And that's where I believe that Trump's inevitable presidency really came from. It's not, I'm going to do a good job. It's not MAGA. It's convincing key players a long time ago, well, what are you going to do when this war finally happens? What are you going to be like Bush? You're going to be like Biden? You're going to be like, and he must have told them a long time ago, I am well aware that Israel has the war hawks that are going to force the U.S. lobby to then force the president or whatever else is necessary, just like Patriot Act, to press that button, to issue that order. Again, Minority Report. I'm sorry I keep bringing this up, but that movie had every freaking trope in it. It had the president nervously unsure if she should press the button. Bassett, what's her name? Something Bassett. Angela Bassett. They have that in the movie so that we're ready for it when it really happens. How freaking scary is that? And then it actually really almost happened. So what happened? I know the media didn't talk about it. A lot of us were watching on edge and waking up next morning hoping everything was fine. We found out next morning that Trump had said, all right, guys, I will totally issue the strike. in a week. And everyone in the war room said, okay, what hour? What time of day? We need to plan, day, night, and surveillance and all this kind of stuff. He said, well, I'll let you know. And the CIA was so mad at him. Since then, there's been a lot of firings back and forth. He recently fired someone from CIA today. Just a lot of bickering because it's truly infighting at the highest level of government with the CIA old guard people saying, you must issue this order now, just like in 24 in that show. And our president said, I'm going to do it when I feel ready, which is the president's right. And I will let you guys know in a week when I do it. And he gaslit everyone into thinking it was going to be like almost a week and they'll lead up to that. And so they're preparing to pressure him at that time. And he went and issued an attack like the next day, that morning. He just like woke up and said, all right, guys, gather. All right, what's our options? Okay, do it. Boom. Guess what bomb he used? MOAB, mother of all bombs. MOAB, right. A non-nuclear device, a non-bunker buster, it's a bunker buster, but it's non-nuclear bunker buster. What is a bunker buster? It uses depleted uranium, a D52 something, depleted, meaning it's been refined by a nuclear reactor. Well, a nuclear reactor generates energy, so we're talking about the output of every nuclear reactor on Earth since the 50s. This stuff was going to exist. They gaslight us and they tell us toxic waste is bad. No, it's not. You can eat toxic waste. It's actually healthy. But depleted uranium is what they're actually telling us the toxic waste is. And it is so bad. If you were anywhere near it, it will kill you. It will suck the life out of you. It'll destroy you. It's like kryptonite, it's Spider-Man. Oh my God, it's the Superman. It's kind of late. And so my point is that there was an inevitable plan to pressure all of the U.S. Republicans, Democrats, president at some point in the timeline, force them all to issue a dirty bomb, nuclear bunker buster strike on a nuclear facility in Iran. And I could just tell you what the big elephant in the room of this is. It's that after they do that, we will never know if those Iranians were building anything at all, including a dangerous bomb, because dangerous bomb radiation will be leaking out of that mountain and just destroying the ecosystem in more of the Middle East. So you can see how the Israelis would then say, see, we told you there was bombs in there. And they got America to shoot the bomb. So they're like, we didn't tell them to do that. In fact, we don't even know who issued that order aside from the president. So that's where I'm going to mention Epstein one time. There does seem to be sort of like this Epstein sort of conspiracy related to pressuring celebrities, but mostly politicians all over the world, blackmailing them into certain acts. And there's many examples, like the recent foundation that the Genius Act by Trump. It had almost every single Republican and Democrat vote on it. Yes. We've never seen that before, and we've never seen that in our lifetime that I know of. Even the Patriot Act wasn't that successful. And I should know because only one person, senator I like in Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene, made an issue about it. She said, I'm the only one that voted no. And I believe that America's dollar, when they took it off the gold standard in 1972, has depleted its value from $1 to something like 9 cents on the dollar from what it was worth only in the 70s. And that kind of thing has truly, truly bankrupted America, much beyond the debts that we talk about, just the affordability of basic things. And she said this Bitcoin Genius Act is only going to make things worse. Well, isn't it surprising that she's going against Trump there? Because Trump did sign it. Well, what is Trump doing? He knows that it's a violation of our sovereignty, but he knows that the Bitcoin thing, that one issue that's also a big elephant in the room, had always also had an inevitable preordained deep state fate. That was one of the many things, just like the Iran war and the Patriot Act, that they could count on pressuring enough people to get the votes they need at the highest level of our government, the federal government, in the time that they need. And then the media would go along with it and did exactly what they meant to do in the last 2 months and completely blacklist it and not tell us about it. Genius Act has now been signed, And we're at risk now, us Americans, of having the federal government close down our digital bank accounts because, they deem us to be a terrorist or a citizen enemy of the state. Why am I not so worried about this? Because I understand that Trump hijacked it in a way that was really going to be far out of the control of the deep state. Again, getting us past the point where they could cause a catastrophe, a financial meltdown. That's been long predicted, much like the market crash, Black Friday, very planned, obviously. If you give the government that kind of power, they're going to do it, Like if you give them control of alcohol, they're going to poison alcohol. They have this history.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show.
So I'm saying that the Epstein thing, regardless of what the truth of it is, you can count on there being some truth. Definitely was a serious threat to our ability to have a government. And if the true clientele list or whatever the real secrets are was to be released, we would have to experience a major breakdown of our government and governments around the world, a fallout, a chaos and our anarchy, something that we don't need right now, something that would be debilitating towards those who are already debilitated, and give everyone who's trigger happy and believing they'll benefit from regional warfare just another chance to go and exploit the situation. So you can see why Trump and Pam Bondi, who is the Attorney General, I think, and a bunch of other people are just saying, nothing to see here, folks. Go home. There's not an Epstein list that we know of, and there's not going to be one anytime soon. And everyone's like, well, what about the one that was on Pam Bondi's desk? Either she was lying. We need to know what she knew when she knew it. She's either lying this point or that point. And the truth is, yeah, there probably is something. It's not going to be like a list. It's going to have people like Robert De Niro and I don't know.
I'm sure that list has been muddied up regardless, meaning that there's people that are included on that list that had no idea anything was going on, meaning that let me just give you a flight from here to here because we happen to be at the same party, and then that person's on the list. So then by doing that, you have all of these people that had no involvement still being blackmailed into trying to keep the list hidden, even though they have nothing to do with anything, just because if their name comes out in correlation with that list, they're going to be involved and people are going to assume the worst of them. So it's like, even just simply by muddying the waters, you've now brought a lot more people into this blackmail scheme that are still trying to cover it up.
I know, and their friends and their family go along with it because they understand that that it would be the end of their career and their lifestyle and whatnot. So it's a huge, just effective intimidation tactic, and it just tells us that it's not that our politicians are bad people. It's just that they were more or less born and raised to be who they are, or handpicked because of how loyal they would be, or whatnot. So I was going to say, like you just totally nailed it. The list isn't going to be what we expect. It's not going to be a list of bad people. It's going to be a very complicated and highly crafted list in order too, so that we all come up with our own reasoning, or fill in our own blanks, and come to our own conclusions in the exact same way that if Trump was on that list and Trump shut down the investigation and Trump's attorney found no information from Maxwell in the recent testimony, that he is just protecting himself and his friends. So, it is exactly as simple as it's meant to be.
I want to throw this theory in before we get too far off, because we were talking about the Middle East recently and Israel, of course.
Yeah.
And everybody's been talking about this whole because we're talking about like predictive programming, and I think this is something intentional that people are kind of missing the ball on. So I kind of want to clear it up because I found it on accident. I've seen a lot of stuff going around with like YouTube and TikTok shorts talking about this whole idea that there's Israel and then there's all the countries that surround it that have flags that are red, green, white, and black. And they're talking about the correlation with the four horsemen from the apocalypse. And to be more specific, the countries that include those four colors are Iraq, the United Arab Nation, Jordan, Sudan, Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Yemen, and Kuwait. And everybody's talking about this whole thing about like, oh, is this supposed to represent the apocalypse? Like, was the apocalypse, this is supposed to be what the four horsemen were. So I accidentally came across this thing that said, this flag was basically designed to revolt against the Ottoman Empire using those specific colorations. And the flag was designed in 1916 by a British diplomat, Mark Sykes, to create a sense of Arab unity while revolting against the Ottoman Empire in World War II. So, talking about predictive programming, if you have this person from England who started to create this flag, he maybe intentionally, subconsciously used the colors of the four horsemen to represent all of these people so that later on you could spin this concept. I mean, it definitely seems like it would kind of, it seems like it could be like a psychological brainwashing operation that they intentionally use the four colors of the four horsemen from the apocalypse to represent this area so that later on they could come back and still have that subconscious thing in people's minds, not realizing that, again, this was something that was set up. It was nothing biblical, anything like that. It was literally a British guy in 1916, which also an included piece I have to add in here. 1913, they set up the Federal Reserve. Central banking system gets set up around that time. 1916 is when you start getting into the concepts about them trying to find or take over all these places in the Middle East to be able to start developing a central banking system there. So isn't it kind of weird how around that same time, somebody from England sets up all these flags that have the subconscious brainwashing of having the four colors of the apocalypse? Like, I know people have spun that one way, but I want to spin it back another way so that we realize this is probably some like psychological brainwashing.
You're absolutely right. This is a great theory to bring up. I'm gonna give you some fill in the blanks there.
I figured you probably have some info on this one, so this is why I wanted to throw this one in with you.
So you're absolutely right to link apocalyptic literature with the actual physical location of what we believe to be Israel, the Holy Land. That is something that would work in everyone's minds on the planet, including people who are secular, right? Because we've all heard about these places. So if this region was to suddenly catch on fire and you suddenly had a preacher on the street screaming, look, it's look at the colors, look at the system, we're in another apocalypse. It really isn't all that surprising because the last apocalypse, according to Fomenko, was a military campaign. It was literally that same empire, that Ottoman Empire, which is really just named after Atman, the leader of the vassal state of Istanbul, and vassal to Russia, that is, who did in fact invade Europe. We're simply seeing a plan concocted by the British. You're right, though of course I do not believe it originated with the British at all, but it started with them, it traces back to them in all forms. And here's the thing that really puts it together for me. If you watch the movie A Woman Named Golda, it's about the Prime Minister Golda Meir of Israel, one of the long-lasting and definitely most significant prime ministers since Ben Gurion. She worked close with the guy, of course. And in that movie, they make it very clear. You see British people in Israel, and they're just on fire with the with sort of a biblical connection to it. They're just it's kind of funny that these English people would even become obsessed with Israel, being Protestants and whatnot. But hey, that's where we're at in the 19th century, right? Because that colony's there. So for whatever reason, we have 20th century a bunch of British agents in pre-Israel in Palestine before 48, literally taking actively engaged in their revolution to create a country. And those British agents are, they're bringing all of the military and soldiers from England and other regions in Europe to supply the Israelis. In the same movie, you have this one meeting where they're just like, oh no, this Arab state's going to attack us. And then this one guy in the meeting is like, why did the British give them weapons? And it's like, yeah, why did the British show up in that region with those 9 flags and create the 9 flags and all of the militaries of all those countries? I mean, isn't the military the biggest, most significant influence in the country? I mean, it's directly tied to whatever religion they have. They're going to rally around their military every time they're attacked by anyone. So to set up a repeat of ancient history, the apocalypse, when the empire attacked all of these rebellious vassal states in the West and gave the deep state a tremendous boost in power and influence, they're simply trying to repeat their history again with those same Russian vassal states, aiming the weapon in the opposite direction, aiming it at Russia, where they came from, convincing them they didn't come from Russia, they came from the Ottoman Empire, that the Ottoman Empire is separate and has more to do with Prussia with a P than Russia with an R. And this is something, by the way, that the Nazis came up with when they took over Germany, that the Germans had a strong connection with Russia. The Nazis severed that connection, saying, no, those regions were actually called Prussia, and changed the history. Then we defeat the Nazis and do a denazification program. We burn nearly all their books, and we keep some of it. And we say, when it comes to Prussia and all of the Serbian states, we're going to adopt the Nazi version of history that they were teaching their children, that we were also against when we invaded the Nazis. We're going to teach that in our classes over here in America under the guidance of Operation Paperclip, under the exact same German Nazis that wrote those books. And it's just like, why would we do that? Because we're pointing the weapon back at Russia. And we have to say that all these regions are going to attack Russia are essentially not, have no connection to it, so that they can't, say stop and make a peace deal. So how do you attack Russia with the vassal states? Well, back in the day, it was the horsemen, very scary, showing up at night, coining the term nightmare, and it was an advantageous, sudden military tactic when nobody knew anything about horses. They mass spread them and create all these farms out of burning forests, and they spread across Europe quickly. So you can see how that tactic worked back then. You can see how nothing that the Arabs could possibly come up with today could possibly work against Russia, and that their soldiers would be defeated long before they ever reached Moscow. So how do you attack with these 9 vassal states? You use terrorism instead. So you radicalize those states, and to light the fuse on the terrorism, you have the instigator of all the terrorism, the reason why everyone's upset. Something that the British created too, when they mandated Palestine to be separated into those 2 states, one Arab, one Israeli, and then abandoned everyone, leaving the Israelis with a ton of weapons and the Arabs with nothing, because they didn't arm the Palestinians for some reason. Like I said, the British knew exactly what they're doing. They couldn't have let such a mess behind by accident. They did not leave the Palestinians unarmed by any accident, and there's many million Palestinians were driven out in the Nakba. So that was not an accident, because that was the one and only reason ever for the Arabs to be mad at Jews. When before that, Nakba, Arabs welcomed Jews everywhere throughout the country, throughout the planet. And there's very specific reasons why pogroms would occur, usually having something to do with the czars of the country, like in Morocco, where my family's from, having been protected by the Sultan, then having the Sultan overthrown by the France colonial agents, and have a puppet French Sultan last 4 years, 8 years, something, be overthrown. You can go watch. I'm spacing it. It's another amazing movie in the 50s. I'll drop it after. I'll go look it up. I'll drop a link to you after. That shows how Morocco, the Battle of Tangier. Finally, I got it. In the Battle of Tangier movie, you'll see that the French, they did everything to eradicate the resistance and just backfired on them. And then during that chaos, there was a pogrom, and the Jews were kicked out of their high-ranking positions and their rich, businesses. My grandfather had his business burned down, and they all fled to Israel. So you can see how it really was those colonists the whole time. In that case, it was the French, and then in all of the Palestine history, it was the British mandating Palestine in such a negligent way, creating this situation where there would be animosity between 2 Abrahamists, between the brothers of, between Isaac and Ishmael descendants. I mean, this is absurd. No one thought this could happen in the 20th century. And that it has happened could only point to the possibility that it was all very temporary, that the radicalization of Islam, the radicalization of Sunni and Shiites, was in itself almost completely going to wipe itself out like a virus does, because of how unstable it was. It was called the plague by the Arabs. They did not accept ISIS to be anything related to Islam or the Quran. And the Jews, in the exact same token, have massively protested their own government for what they see as a failure to maintain peace in order of rallying, excuses to go to war, failing to deliver hostages and make deals to rescue them, and then taking advantage of the situation like they're doing right now, and declaring that they're going to invade all of Gaza, knowing, as they said, that they're not going to be able to save the hostages. So, yeah, I've seen an ancient plan. I think a lot of people have seen an ancient plan here, ancient by 70 years now, and that the good actors simply forestalled it long enough to be able to come up with a reasonable resistance to it. Very complicated.
Just to throw in this too, since we're talking about like representing the colors within flags, just out of curiosity, I was looking up, a lot of these flags, like the British flag, the American flag, the French flag, it all contains the main colors of red, white, and blue. And if you're trying to correlate it with some other symbology, possibly relating to something that has to do with the biblical reference, you look up red, of course, means war, which definitely fits for those countries. White means conquest, which definitely fits for those countries. The weird one that doesn't fall in with the four horsemen is blue. But when you look up blue, the reference, when I look up blue for a reference within the Bible, it basically says the color blue, often derived from the Hebrew word, you might know how to pronounce this, Tekhelet.
I don't know the word, but Tekla, is that what?
Yeah, I can screen share just so you can see what the word visually looks like here.
Sure.
Right here. But symbolizes the heavens, divine transcendence, God's commandments, and the covenant between God and Israel. Right. So, kind of weird, right? If they purposely picked red, white, and blue, matching with biblical references, basically what they're trying to represent is war, conquest, and a link between Israel. That's how I'm reading that.
Absolutely. Let me give you one theory of mine. I haven't heard anyone say this yet, but you've heard of the tribe of Benjamin, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. The clue I got was from Fomenko, who said the 12 tribes were always regarded historically in antiquity as the 12 regions of the Russian Empire throughout the world, and therefore the 12 tribes of all of the human species here on Earth. 12 different distinct demographics back in the day, including Chinese people and Africans. And that's why you find all these references to Jewish stuff in Africa, actually. And that the 12th tribe of Benjamin, you can look this up in the Bible, was at some point in really ancient times, according to the Bible, wiped out by the other 11 tribes. Now, what was that? Why did it happen? Well, I don't remember the story exactly, but it had something to do with them letting their women marry someone then outside the tribe, and then the other tribes didn't approve. Something petty. It's not the point. The point is that you don't really see this very often, but you do see this in Old Testament literature. In the story of Masada, where the Jews sacrificed themselves rather than giving themselves to the Romans, where in Exodus, like I said earlier, 90% of the Israelites were wiped out by God. And in this case, in the Old Testament, later on, 12 Israeli tribes wipe out one of them for disobeying God. Now, no one talks about this much. I didn't even hear Christians talk about it because it's close to anti-Semitism, essentially, much like talking about Nida 45 in the Talmud. I'm not even going to tell you what that says, but you get my idea. Certain things are off limits, can't talk about them. And this is one of them, because I think there's way more to it than what we realized. Now, the tribe of Benjamin suddenly disappears, not in ancient times, but in the 17th century, according to Fomenko. And, the 15th century. And it was the same story as the 1492 discovery of America, the invasion of Europe coinciding, that drove them all out, the Spanish Inquisition that scared them in the first place to go to America. And this tribe wasn't actually wiped out. I mean, Fomenko makes it very clear that this is a literature thing, a literary device to describe why one of the 12 tribes suddenly disappeared. Because the other tribes did chase them out as a union, essentially. The other 11 tribes were part of the empire. The empire was doing a crusade, and the crusade was like everyone in every region versus the resistant regions, Protestant, Western Europe. And so when the 12th tribe of Israel, the tribe of Benjamin, was wiped out, he actually fled to America and disappeared, and nobody ever heard from them again. And then the funniest thing ever happened. a big sort of brain fog, if you will, appeared for 2 centuries. And in the 19th century, we were told that the Israelis, the Jews, were the people of the book, the Old Testament, and that they were all of the 12 tribes, not everyone else in the world, that was now exclusive to them, and that they have survived something horrible, some sort of worldwide diaspora, that they had lost their empire and they're now in a diaspora. So it's like, wait a second here. There is some kind of weird connection between the founding of America and the disappearance of that 12th tribe. First of all, they came to America and they discovered America. And we still talk about Columbus and they make a big deal about Columbus and sometimes even call America Columbia. And this country was founded by a founding father, not necessarily the one who was around during the Revolution, but Benjamin Franklin was the one who appears on one of our dollar bills, and yet he's not a president. Some people find it weird that he's smiling. He's the only one smirking. And his name is Benjamin. And I'm actually related to him. And I'm told that there was some sort of Jewish ancestry there. So it just occurs to me that the people who came to America were in this very unique position, resisting Russia, and would eventually spread their Protestant Reformation, predictive programming, agenda to the entire planet versus Russia. So they got to define who everyone else was. They got to define who the Jews were, the Muslims, the Christians, the Buddhists, everyone. Those people, the Americans, the ones who fled to Europe and took all of the knowledge with them, by the way, and then forced Europe to essentially fight in endless wars and erase all of its knowledge, were the only ones in the position to know who the real Jews were. And in fact, they consider themselves to be the only real tribe of Benjamin, the ones that came here to America. And so now at this point, I've referenced actual facts from the beginning to end. I haven't actually come up with any points where I think it's a theory or a speculation that those people who founded America were in a position to redefine all religion here on Earth. And I think they did it because, as you just said, they put all of their encoding in all of the flags of the world. So I think we know that they were at least in that kind of position. Maybe it was really England taking advantage of their massive shipping fleet, or maybe it was Spain in league with England's in a sort of Protestant way that nobody in modern history or modern historians don't understand, because they thought that England was at war with Spain for so long, and that the Protestants and Catholics were at war, which is what we were told. And if that's not true, then we're talking about a worldwide conspiracy lasting about 500 years to erase Christianity, to erase every religion, to redefine everyone and what a religion is. When I said that, I meant a Muslim is now somebody in Arabian countries. And a Jew is somebody who has rich connections to the authoritarian class of every region in the world, left over by the vassal state system. Now today known as crypto Jews. I'm amazed that that term even is allowed on Wikipedia, because the word crypto Jew gives away so much of this conspiracy to rebrand that 12th tribe as all of the important leaders of all of the important religions of the world and the militaries and everything else too. And you can look up their plan, the one that they made before they went to America. It's a plan called Rex Bellator. I may have mentioned it before. And it is a plan to order all of the military orders of the world under one king, an antichrist or whatever you want to call him. It's not mythical, it's not spiritual, and it's not magical. It's just an old military campaign that they're trying to repeat. And the gun's currently aimed at Russia. And that's about it. That's about the end of the theory there. I've rambled a lot. Is there any parts of the timeline that you want me to go over, or is that pretty much a good place to end it?
Yeah, I think it might be a good spot to start wrapping it up for today. I mean, honestly, like I've said a million times, dude, when you end up doing your research, you hit every single little detail of things that it's like,
thank you.
It's hard to go back into it because you already hit every single fine detail of it, man. And I know that we could still probably go into a million directions, so we can end up using this as another excuse to have you come back on in a month or so we can start up a new series. But yeah, man, as always, man, I appreciate you making the time to come on, sharing all of your deep thoughts on all this stuff, and going back and forth with me on some of these ideas, because there's a few things like I want to bring up, like the color coding thing that I knew that you were going to have a lot more information on. So I'm really glad that you're able to fill in the dots for some of that stuff, even more so than I was already connecting, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, actually.
Hold on tight, guys. This is our last break, so stay tuned. And we are back to the show. So let's hop right in. And I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end, I always still have to hit you with some words of wisdom. So if there's any words of wisdom that you might want to bestow on the listeners this time, man, what might it be?
This time will be a little different, I guess. This time I'll say be brave, because it's a good time to be brave. It's like 4 years ago was a bad time to be brave, right? You know, and everyone would punish you, even your friends would punish you, and now everyone's looking for some leadership. They're looking in all directions. I can see it. So this is just a good time to go and do that thing that we were all intimidated from doing before. You know, that's why I'm doing movie edits. You know, I don't care if it's illegal. Someday it's going to be illegal. And I'm planting those seeds now. I'm hoping that eventually I'll be able to, you know, have millions of people view my edits, because I don't really approve of what Hollywood does, and this is sort of my way of resisting without rejecting. So be brave. That's my advice.
Ain't that the truth? I mean, now more than ever. I mean, definitely during COVID for sure, because you had to have somebody that started that initial wave to get people to actually start questioning stuff. But now we're in the point where, like you kind of mentioned earlier, everybody's kind of forgetting about these events that happened a couple of years ago, but yet everybody's kind of at this lost point where, you know, now is especially the time to stand up, because now we're having this like in-between thing where, as you mentioned, like the Democrat Party's kind of falling apart. It seems like it's either you're all the way this way or you're kind of stuck in the middle somewhere. So, you know, stand up, say the things that you need to say, do the things that you need to do. And I said, don't be afraid to say what you have to do and be tough about it.
Agreed. That's good advice.
And if anybody wanted to come and check out your awesome website that I know you're always adding to, always covering new stuff on, where can everybody come and find all of your work that you're doing? And since you mentioned your edits, where can people possibly even come find your edits?
Excellent. Paradigmthreat.net is my website. And if you want a movie, you got to just DM me directly, because there's no way to post links these days without getting in trouble. So everything is DM these days.
And man, like I said earlier, I appreciate you making the time to come on, and I'm really looking forward to next time again.
You bet. Thanks, Shayn. See you around.
If anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the two that I'm the most active on. Or you guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form, which is available up at the top of the link tree. And the last way you guys can get a hold of me is by texting or calling the Bizarre Reality Hotline. And that number is 313-364-1551. And if you happen to miss that, all the links that I mentioned are all available down in that show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Reality isn't what it seems. Abductees taking aboard a craft with a tractor beam. Is life a simulation or an astral dream? Aliens travel through black holes in different galaxies. Life is a bizarre odyssey, with a mic talking about philosophy. Well, Bigfoot is stalking campers as a Wendigo walks through the woods of sharpened antlers, using a Ouija board to talk to the dead like a necromancer. There's so many questions and not enough answers. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to Inquiries of Our Reality. So if you're interested in mysteries and abnormalities, tune in and listen to